What is up everyone, it's Saber here and welcome to another Naruto What If. If you end up liking the video, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can take it back at any time and it really helps me out, and this is my third channel, so if you want some more what ifs, go check out my other channels. And with all of the YouTube formalities out of the way, let's get into it. Sansa sat silently staring aimlessly, all the while her food grew cold below her. Icy blue tully eyes shimmered a million colors with each passing second. No tears, only fears. Her silence and depression was beginning to scare Arya, whom of which sat on the opposite end of the table, fork in hand and knife in the other. The two Stark girls sat with their dire wolves at their sides, protective and loving. They knew no harm would befall them as long as their dire wolves stayed with them, but the fear was still there and alive, especially to Sansa. Her whole life was spent curtsying and crochet, but recently she'd killed some men alongside her younger siblings. All three of them had killed in self-defense. To her it didn't matter the reason behind the killing. It didn't wash the blood from her hands. She could tell herself over and over that she had to do it, but that still didn't take the image of dying men from her mind. She'd done it. She'd killed. She'd watched their eyes widen with surprise and guilt. She watched the light disappear only to be replaced with the dark void that death seems to be. She'd seen it and now it wasn't leaving her alone. Oh, how she wished to be free of these horrible images. The queen was off doing queenly things such as ruling the kingdoms in her son's stead. Since Joffrey decided to join the fight himself, Sansa felt a smile spread across her face. Joffrey could die on the field of battle. A giggle unbeknownst to her escaped her lips, gaining Arya's attention once more. Arya frowned at her sister, wondering if she'd gone mad, yet suddenly the young Stark got an idea, and she knew that there was nothing that Sansa could do to go against it. She shot to her feet, pushing her chair away. Sansa, Arya said with a flat tone, "You're going to learn how to dance, Naruto." Sasuke rushed up to him, a strange look wrought across his face. The prince did a quick look around to see if he was clear or not. Finding his troops spread out through Tumbleton's defenses, he looked to Sasuke with a look of defeat. "Don't tell me what I think you're going to tell me." The Baratheon leaned against the stone walls of the South Gatehouse. "Lord Randall Tarley is on his way here with a tenth of you uncle's forces," Sasuke quickly said. "Just about 10,000 men are charging for you right here and now." "Gods, why so many?" Naruto sighed in exasperation. "Did you get far enough to see what they were planning? It has to do with your uncle Renly wanting you." Sasuke shrugged. "He wants you alive. As for the rest of your troops, I don't know." "Do you have any idea of what to do?" Naruto asked. I don't know if we can fight 10,000 men. If you haven't noticed, we have only about 450 troops and no other lord in the royal army has answered our calls for reinforcements." I know, Sasuke growled. "Let me think." Baka Lady Tarina suddenly arrived, worried and distraught at her sides. The rest of Naruto's battle companions stood. Tarina walked ahead of the troop and handed Naruto a parchment. "A raven," she said, "from Storm's End. Your uncle Renly has made his first move to where?" Naruto asked with narrowed brows. "He's split his force into tents, each heading to different castles and towns bordering the Reach and the Westerlands and Crownlands." Lady Tarina sighed. "And Lord Randall Tarley is on his way to Tumbleton as we speak." Naruto finished shooting to his feet. "I know, I'm having a bad feeling about all of this. Why did he wait so long to move his forces?" "Maybe because you made the first move," Bran asked, getting everyone's attention. "You attacked Tumbleton, the gateway from the Reach into the Crownlands. Certainly that means something for his forces, so he was just waiting for us to make the first strike." Naruto ran a hand against his face. "I say we continue to give them what they want." Bran smirked. What? The battle companions were completely caught off guard. "I'm saying we meet them in the field of battle." Bran was suddenly cut off by the resident Summer Islander. "Brandon, I mean this with the highest respect. But are you mad?" Jalabar asked exasperatedly. "They have 10,000 men on their way." "I know that, I'm not deaf." Bran sighed. "I have a plan. We cut them off little by little. You see, because we are such a small force, they'll never expect us. We'll sneak into their camp with relative ease." "And what do we do while we're in their camp?" Ser Delran asked, clearly catching on to what the young Stark was saying. "We cut the head from the snake." Bran's smirk grew to a deadly size. "If our previous battles were any merit, defeating the leader sends the troops in a fray. You can even get deserters to fill the empty ranks." "I was just about to say the same thing." Bran Naruto smiled, stretching his arms and back. "Bran, you and Jalabar, along with the best archers, will have to run Overwatch. Myra and the knights are going to be with me as we sneak into the camp tonight." Lady Tarina, Ser Delran, "Stay with the troops and fortify Tumbleton." Naruto made quick orders. "Saw shit, Sasuke." Naruto thought quickly keeping to himself, make sure you keep up that genjutsu thing, whatever it was. I don't know if I can continue that. Sasuke took a deep breath. I didn't even know I can use genjutsu in this state. Just do what you can, Sasuke. Naruto took a deep breath and sighed. That genjutsu thing was extremely helpful. The prince walked off as his battle companions dispersed, clapping his swords against the stone steps. Naruto took in the image of Tumbleton, large houses and small houses along with the main keep. In the center, the victory was rather simple. They cut through the defenses like a hot knife to butter. The men surrendered within an hour of the siege. If Naruto wasn't in a depressing predicament, he would have laughed at the memory. The Lord collapsed to his feet and begged not to be killed in a rather comical way. Nonetheless, Naruto had them under his watch, and the original garrison was now being used by him. Fox Company wasn't going to be refilled anytime soon using deserters and traitors of the Crown. Naruto didn't know if he could trust the Lord of Tumbleton yet or his troops, but he was leaving Ser Delran and Lady Tarina for that specific reason. That Lord was mighty terrified of the two veterans. Naruto just hoped that the Lord didn't do anything ridiculous while he was gone. If that was the case, the prince knew that he could trust Ser Delran to remove the Lord the moment he becomes a liability. Naruto continued, a long bored look on his face. Naruto, a voice came from behind the prince. Shout around, spinning on his heel. Myra, I wanted to talk to you. She trailed off. Sure, anything you need. There was an awkward silence. There were some Fox Company members watching them with awkward looks. She took a deep breath, her brown eyes scanning the various men and women walking past them in private. Myra sighed. Please, alright. Naruto smiled, enjoying her distress. The two walked side by side, parting the troops. As they passed them by, Myra, though, wanted to get closer to him. She couldn't save him before, so she was going to make sure she wouldn't fail him again. The prince continued his walk towards the keep. If he was intending to talk in his chambers, she didn't know if she'd be able to control herself. Her heart was racing. She bit her lip, wiping some stray dirt on her brow. Her boots clacked against the cobblestone road. How did he recuperate so fast? Myra thought to herself. He looks as if everything that's happened hasn't affected him. She walked along, twiddling with her thumbs and fingers, waiting for the right moment to say something. Oh, she berated herself. Something. There has to be more than just something. She needed to let him know that she had no idea that everything was going to collapse and fall to shit within a matter of hours. She frowned to herself. She was going crazy, lingering too much on what happened in the past. But one thing was for certain. Being locked in a cell wasn't the best experience she's had. She was hoping that she doesn't end up sleeping on a damp stone floor again. She shuddered softly. There were a few leering bandits in the dungeons with her. She was certain they would rape her down there. With the looks they gave her, she could see the lust burning in their eyes. She forced those images from her mind. She eyed her surroundings, watching the back of Naruto's hair wave in the wind. She couldn't stop staring at him. She couldn't stop loving him. She groaned, getting the prince's attention. Once the two made eye contact, she shut quiet and looked away, still following him with a steady pace. It didn't take long for her to realize that she was in his chambers within the keep. He sat in his seat watching her with amused eyes. A small smirk grew on his face when she realized that she'd been staring off into space like a fish out of water. Hell, she felt that she'd laugh if she wasn't so flustered in his presence. She stared into his oceanic sapphire orbs, wondering why he was so enchanting so much, so she nearly forgot what she wanted to talk about. Naruto. She trailed off, walking towards the window overlooking the city. What am I to you? Rob sat ready, hand wrapped around his sword, and a glare spread across his stern face. The greatest battle of the war as of yet was at hand. He had finally pulled Lord Tywin into his trap. The Lannister was below, waiting at the vanguard of his forces with a not so worried but not so confident look. His troops, all 20,000 of them, were setting up defensive positions. Lannister pikemen were already moving into position. He watched them falling into their formations. It was a little strange to the Stark pikemen to the front, forming square formations. Behind them, Lannister longbowmen were running into position. If his pikemen were any indication, Lord Tywin was expecting Robb to charge in with his cavalry like he usually did. Robb, though, wasn't about to do that and risk his life and the lives of his closest friends and trusted battle companions. If there was one flaw that Robb had managed to piece together, the Lannister pikemen were lacking shields, and while their pikes were indeed pikes, they weren't pikes. He could still hit them with his archers, drawing them closer to him. Once they were within his grasp, he and his cavalry could swoop in and crush them. All he had to do was get his archers in position. Another problem, though, his archers had short bows while the Lannisters had longbows. It would requires some maneuvering to get them into place, but he felt that he could do it. Lord Umber the king said, bring some of your toughest and fastest riders to draw the attention of their archers as you command your grace. The Umber bowed his head slightly with a great cry to go with his name. 50 riders shot forth speeding towards the Lannister lines. They stayed out of range of the pikes, but still close enough to be deemed targets. They rushed past the Lannisters, getting the front line's attention. Robb felt the corners of his lips curl. He'd caught their attention. A wave was made, bringing up Lord Nestor Royce to the king's side. Bring our archers up to the helm as fast as possible while our cavalry distracts their front. Robb quickly said, their target will be the pikemen. Archers we can handle. Understood, your grace. The Lord Yon nodded to his king. Archers front and center. The cavalry turned round, about rushing back towards his lines. His ice blue Tully eyes raced back and forth, watching the distance for signs of the rest of the howling wolves. He was extremely clear as one could be, about being secretive and making sure they weren't spotted. Closing in Tywin and his host was the most important part of the strategy he needed. The old man boxed in with nearly nowhere to run. Once the siege of Harrenhal begins and is won, everything will fall into place. He took a deep breath, his body shaking in excitement, for what was to come will defeat them. Robb whispered to himself. He turned his head to his battle companion's crown waving in his hair before resting snug on his head. We will defeat them, all of them. None of us are dying today. He turned his head back, watching the arrows fly. Almost 100 pikemen were defeated within seconds. Robb shivered, feeling a strange explosion of power within him. Grey Wind growled softly, baring his teeth, clearly ready for the battle coming up. Before he could do anything else, a soft hand rested on his shoulder. It was none other than Lady Dacey Mormont of Bear Island. The lanky beauty of House Mormont gave her king a small, courageous, reassuring smile that brought all kinds of emotions to writhe within the king. In the north, he could hear the whistle clear as day. The battle was at hand, and the pikemen were already beginning their advance. A quick motion of cloth and hands. Lord Nestor got the message and signaled the retreat. Suddenly Lord Tywin made a change in formations. His troops began to spread out slowly, encompassing all that Robb could see. The ranks were coming close to his hidden troops. The fields around Derry had forests and tall grass, but the farther the Lannisters spread, the less Robb had to work with. He grabbed a banner from one of his banner carriers and waved it mercilessly, hoping his troops in hiding would get the message. Lord Tywin was clearly confused by this, but went along believing the message to be a morale booster. Within seconds Lord Nestor arrived, sweat pouring down his cheeks. Behind him, archers and the cavalry contingent arrived shortly after. They were tired, and the archers were already empty of arrows. Robb felt defeated already. His eyes trailed up, watching his archers draw their swords and join ranks with his infantry and swordsmen. His cavalry contingent was beaten up and rather bloodied. He'd made a mistake, bringing only his personal company and 2 others. There were more Lannisters than he'd thought. I hope the siege of Harrenhal is going far better than this, Robb thought wistfully. This was going to be far more difficult than the Battle of the Whispering Wood. There he had all sorts of advantages that the Lannisters didn't have, but now he was meeting Lord Tywin on open field. No longer was he chasing Lord Tywin across the land, wearing him down through attrition, but instead he was mad enough to challenge the battle-hardened veteran in real open combat. He was mad enough to challenge the man who forced House Rain into extinction. In Robb's worried mind, this was the first real battle he'd fought in the entire war. Every other battle was used as a ruse to pull someone from Tywin's host, but now the tables have turned and their forces were matched. Robb couldn't lose here. He just couldn't. Shaking his head, he could see Lannister men at arms taking place over the pikemen at the front lines. This was more than perfect. Instead, this was the exact tactical blunder that the Stark was hoping Lord Tywin would make. Of all things, Robb was surprised that Lord Tywin would change his vanguard. That could only mean that Tywin believed that he would try to do another distraction trick like he did with the cavalry. No, Robb never used the same trick twice. When it came to Lord Tywin, Robb took a deep breath, keeping his eyes on the small flashes of light coming from the trees and tall grass. His troops were finally in position and were awaiting his orders. He released his held breath when Lord Tywin's host stopped spreading ranks. He was wide and open, ready and ripe for the taking. Robb couldn't stop the growing smile on his face. Lannister banners spread out like a small sea of red and gold. No matter the size, Robb was finally certain that he can win this. He turned back to his battle companions and yelled with as much power as he can manage. They exploded in excitement, drawing their swords and weapons. They repositioned themselves, gearing for the greatest battle they've fought up to date. They have lost their vanguard. Robb roared, "Charge!" Robb slapped the reins and sped forward. The Wind blew through his auburn hair behind him. His companions rushed alongside him, making sure they didn't lag behind their king. He held the banner in his left hand as steady as possible, keeping the sigil of House Stark strong and ready to strike. He turned his eyes to see the positions he'd taken and watched the leaves and tall grass rustle. He was ready. They were ready. He hoped that Tywin was ready, for that old man was going to have his arse handed to him on his silver platter. The vanguard was coming close, south close. In fact, Robb could feel time slow next to him. Grey Wind's teeth shined in the rays of the sun, looking ready to dig into flesh of man. The sweat drops forming on the Lannister footmen could be seen as clear as this day. He could feel the small wisps of cold pinching his cheeks and nose. Everything was thrown into perspective within a few short seconds, like never before. Robb saw his life flash before his. From training with Jon as children all the way to learning his father was murdered. Rage filled his veins. The memory of his anguish and his pain rushed forth with new vigor, almost as fresh as the day he first felt it. He came to remember his sisters and brother were hostages of the royal family. They were held against their own accord, and the only way he was going to get them back was if he surrendered and let the North fall back onto its knees to these lords. His glare deepened as he neared the front lines. He didn't want justice, he wanted revenge. Not a second to waste. Robb punched through the front line, trampling over at least 10 of Tywin's swordsmen. Grey Wind was huge now, easily plowing through the line of shields and swords. The king in the north drew his longsword and swung down with the power of the gods, digging his blade through the skull of 2 unprepared swordsmen, spraying their blood onto their friends' faces. He was on a mission. He was going to exterminate the Lannister military machine here and now. Tearing the blade from the dead Lannister, Robb shot forth, swinging in all directions, killing and deflecting to the best his rage would allow. "Onto me!" Robb roared over the explosion of battle companions. "Onto me!" His cry fell onto deaf ears. His cavalry was bogged down by the sheer number of infantry in their way. No second was spared. He was in the middle of a battle. Turning his attention to the center of the pikemen formation, Lord Tywin sat on his high horse. Robb gritted his teeth. A man-at-arms got too close to the Stark for comfort. Feeling an explosion of strength within him, he reached down and lifted the man by the throat. Lannister troops backed away from Robb, slowly giving him a large open space to work with. He could hear them screaming that he was beginning to turn into a wolf. Oh, how he enjoyed that. "I'll give them a wolf," Robb whispered. His eyes rolled to the back of his head as power exploded from within him. The soldiers were about to rush at him, but something huge got in their way. Many were forced to the ground, the entrails pouring from the holes that once made their stomachs. In the wake of their blood and mist stood Grey Wind. His eyes were no longer a shimmering bronze gold, instead they were icy blue, like the king in the north's. Grey Wind rushed forward, using his size and strength to his advantage against the smaller men that he faced with a simple head. But he sent a Lannister sergeant flying into a group of men. He shot around, slashing his tail about, denting one of the Lannister helmets. Robb was serious about slaughtering the Lannisters. Grey Wind jumped, digging his claws into the shoulders of another Lannister sergeant, tearing the man asunder. But Robb wasn't finished. He was far from finished. As Grey Wind, he feasted on a dead Lannister before creeping his head back, releasing a bellowing howl that echoed throughout the battlefield, clearing the land of all sound of battle. As Grey Wind, Robb turned to see Lord Tywin reach worriedly for his arming sword. "Reposition!" the Lannister cried out, but was quickly cut short. An arrow lodged itself into his steed, knocking him from his seat of command. Lannister heads turned in all directions, wondering where the arrow came from. Little by little, though, the Lannisters were pelted by Northman arrows that punched through their armor. The trees and grass rustled, revealing the forces of Lord Umber and Lord Nestor coming up from the flanks. Grey Wind let loose another howl, signaling the order to charge, forcing his mind back into his normal body. Robb smirked darkly as the Northmen charged down from the flanks. The look on Lord Tywin's face was more than just perfect. His personal knights fell victim to the Northmen arrows, puncturing their armor, digging into their flesh. The Lannisters were caught in his ruse somehow. Lord Tywin never expected a strategy like this. It didn't matter. Robb was going to have his victory on the field, and he was going to get his family back together again. This time he wasn't going to mess up and let anyone through his fingers. With a slap of the reins, he shot forward. His steed stomped his hooves into the faces and chests of Lannister footmen should they get in his way. He wasn't going to miss his chance. Not now, not again. Robb jumped free from his saddle once he took notice of one of the pikemen rearing up for an attack. While he was rather lucky his steed wasn't, the pike tore into his horse, killing it in an instant. Grey Wind though rushed up to the scene and sunk his teeth into the man's throat, ending his life just as he ended Robb's horse. The king in the north snapped back to reality, remembering that there was a battle still being fought. Drawing his sword, he clashed with a Lannister sergeant trying to give commands. Robb grabbed the man by the neck and hurled him to the ground. The sergeant reached for his sword with a great confusion springing across his face. Robb dug his sword into the man's chest, ripping and lacerating his flesh. The Stark quickly turned on his heels, sword awash with blood, and swung it down onto the spine of another unsuspecting footman. The king in the north kill him. The rest finally took notice of him. Over the chaos that ensued, with another look around of the battle at hand, he realized that his troops were doing a damn good job at distracting and boxing in the Lannisters. These swordsmen were running toe-to-toe with his dismounted battle companions. One by one they fell victim to the vicious strikes and attacks that the Northmen had at their disposal, and for that Robb knew that this battle was in their hands. Clashing his blade with another, Robb ducked and weaved between each attack, throwing punches and kicks, trying to get a rise out of the knight that decided to challenge him. "You're a lot younger than I thought," the knight spat. "To think someone like you can fight, you mustn't have taken into consideration what I'm called," Robb growled, putting all of his weight into the sword. "I'm the young wolf." The two shot back from each other, pacing back and forth, waiting for the other to make the first move. Neither were going to make it that easy. But Robb just knew that the Lannister pride would break the mold. Two men at arms rushed at Robb, intent on protecting their Night Lord. The Stark shot ahead, sword rushing above, digging into the Lannister helmet with his blade stuck. Robb drew his dagger, all the while twisting and weaving. The man at arms swung, trying his best to strike Robb down. Robb saw him coming from a mile away. He ducked, dropping to a knee just as the footman came into range. Robb let his grip go, forcing the man to the ground as well. The footman struggled to get away. He backed away, but Robb grabbed him. The Stark wasn't about to let his target get away. He jumped into the fallen footman, dagger in hand, with his other wrapped firmly around the man's throat. Robb held steady, prepared to do the deed, but he locked eyes with the soldier below. He wasn't a man, nor was he a seasoned veteran. He was just a boy no older than he. Blue eyes locked with green, but Robb wasn't about to regret what he was doing. He shot his dagger down, plunging the blade into the boy's chest. Blood sprayed to his cheeks, spraying his face. The boy's eyes rolled away, hiding into his skull. The sounds of battle slowly drowned out, and within moments time simply stopped. That boy probably had a family of his own, a life of his own, just like he did. Robb clenched his teeth, trying to fight back the conflicting feelings, but these conflicting feelings suddenly broke, exploding in all directions, revealing an anger he'd never felt before. This boy will never walk this land again. This boy will never kiss a woman. This boy will never see his family again. All because the Lannisters started this war. The Lannisters forced a spear into his hands and slapped him into armor. "No," Robb whispered. "No." Time snapped back, sounds ruptured, sending Robb into a near state of shock. Soldiers were cut down in all directions, with arrows speeding back and forth. Blades clashed, clanging with a shrill, deafening echo. A sharp ring sang in Robb's ears as he came to realize how weak he was being. No time was wasted. He rolled forward, dodging a great sword with near perfection and great luck. He spun back around, remembering his sword was lodged into the skull of a dead soldier and his knife was protruding from the chest of the boy he was facing that night from before. Robb watched the man reposition. His armor was clearly made for maximum protection with the sacrifice of speed. This was a flaw that he was going to take advantage of. He rushed ahead, dodging a swing from the man's greatsword. In the chaos of his swing, Robb wrapped his hand around the handle of his arming sword. He pulled as hard as he can, but the blade was lodged deep. He bit his lip, but with a quick kick to the dead man's head, he pulled his sword free from the corpse. "Bring it, bastard." Naruto sat silently in his bed. Sweat glistened off his body muscles and scars trailed up and down his torso. He took slow, deep breaths. His room was filled with a strange heat that he couldn't explain. His blonde locks of hair stuck to his skin, thick with sweat. He was calm and in fact felt complete again. His rough, battle-hardened palms rested, rubbing against his scarred cheeks. Behind him there was a woman, brown hair fallen into a mess, covering her face from view. He bit his lip, trying to hold in the deep feeling of regret growing within his chest. Sure, Sansa hated his guts for killing her father, but he felt that he was still in love with the Stark. He slept with Myra anyway, though she was sleeping peacefully, hiding her breasts beneath the fur blanket and bed sheets. She looked so different compared to when she's fighting and killing people. She looked euphoric. She was beautiful despite what most thought of her, despite what she always thought of herself. He shivered slightly staring at her bare shimmering back. It was then when he realized the scars she had. Some looked harmless while others seemed to be flaying marks. What kind of pain she must have gone through, Naruto wondered. He sighed, lying back into the bed. There was a soft groan coming from his side. Myra had awoken anyway. Naruto, she moaned. What happened? You know what happened? He smiled softly. I know, I just wanted you to remind me, she whispered. It was better than the first time. Is that so? He asked softly, lowering his face to hers. It is. Her face rose in heat, a blush spreading across her cheeks. You seem to know what you were doing. I had a good idea of what to do this time. Naruto snickered. I didn't hear you complaining. Now why would I do that? She gave him a feigned look of hurt. I'll have you know I enjoyed it, maybe a little more than I should have. It's fine, Myra. Naruto leaned his forehead with hers. We can be together now just like you wanted. What about your marriage with Lady Stark? The bastard asked. And here I was thinking you were a spy. Naruto frowned. Hey, she glared. I'm jesting, the prince quickly replied. I just meant well with the gods, and man as witness Sansa and my brother nullified our marriage. She's probably already married to Joffrey by this point. Myra looked away, chocolate brown eyes drifted. She wanted to smile and thank the gods, but she could tell that this was still affecting her. Prince, with a quick movement, she placed her palm on his scarred cheek, rubbing her thumb against the gashes. The boy shuddered into her hand, bringing his own to hold hers. He was and is officially hers, and there is no one that could take him away from her this time. She slid against the pillow, her nose sliding against the tip of his. No words were shared before she pressed her lips with his. Myra relished in the embrace. Her heart exploded in action when he began to kiss back. She shook and shivered in excitement. He was serious. He leaned over her, blonde hair hanging loose, rubbing against her cheeks, but she knew she needed to breathe. With a reluctant pull at her chest, she broke the kiss while she needed to stop. Naruto didn't. A moan escaped her lips when he shot down to her neck, kissing and sucking at the skin. Her arms wrapped around his neck and back, holding him in place. His warmth was a warmth that she missed. She didn't care what he'd done. She was glad that he was finally here. Her chest began to hurt, her heart wrenched and beat heavier. He is finally hers. She bit her lower lip, trying to fight back the tears building in her eyes. Oh, but that could only last for so long. Her tears shot out and she wept. Naruto sprang up, wiping the sweat from his brow, and gave her a rather confused look. She sat up, wiping the tears from her cheeks. She gave him a longing look with shimmering brown orbs showing all the love she's managed to harbor for him. Naruto's lips slowly curled to Myra. His sapphire blue eyes began to glow. His eyes held depth before, but now she felt she was lost. Oh well. She didn't want to be found. She got ready to catch him into another kiss, but it seems that Naruto beat her to it. His hands shot to her cheeks, caressing her with as much care and a loving softness that she couldn't explain. His lips captured hers, and she wanted to stay like this forever. His hands roamed from her cheeks and lowered to her chest, grasping her breasts, wrapping perfectly around their plump form. She moaned at the action, biting his lower lip to show she was enjoying this. Oh, she was definitely enjoying this. They broke apart, gasping, eyes locked. Nothing could break this moment. Boss, we need you now. Gods damn it, Sarah warned. Naruto shot around. What is so important, Bran? He's gone mad. Naruto and Myra gave each other worried looks. The two sprang from the bed, throwing on leather breeches and their tunics. Myra ran across the chambers and tossed Naruto his bastard sword, all the while wrapping her knife bandolier across her chest and waist. The two moved quickly with a swift, experienced and masterful grace. Within seconds they walked towards the door, opening it to reveal a sweat-faced Jalabar and Serwarn. The two of them looked like they'd just been through a crucible. The two battle companions sighed and led two lovers along across the main keep. Fox Company soldiers could be seen running about, excitement in their steps. Myra gave Naruto a look that spelled worry. Whatever this was, it now had their undivided attention. The troop rushed through the halls before finally coming to the oaken doors. Warren gave Jalabar a wary look, but the two opened the doors, revealing a large crowd of Fox Company troops and shimmering gold. Myra thought with fear. She shot forward ahead of the rest of the group. She pushed through the soldiers of their company before finally coming to the scene. There was a boy lying on the cobblestone square with a busted lip and a dented bull helmet wrapped in his hands. Next to him, two women of Fox Company were tending to his wounds. But that wasn't what got her attention. It was the young Stark standing with a bloodied sword, and Summer standing next to him. In front of the two northerners there was a team of 5 gold cloaks. What the hell are gold cloaks doing this far from King's Landing? How dare you come here and try to take one of our brothers? She heard Bran roar. I don't care who sent you, be it the king or the gods themselves. You won't lay another finger on him or any of us. By orders of the king, traitors. Spawn. The lead Gold Cloak spat, sword in hand. You've injured an officer of the law. You are under arrest and will be taking that bastard as well. Like I said rather clearly, Bran growled. You won't be taking any of us. Naruto arrived next to Myra, an amused look on his face. Myra looked to him and nearly felt the urge to slap him across the face. How could be so nonchalant about this? Bran was about to commit murder. Naruto gave Myra a look that spoke of no argument, though with that the girl stayed quiet and looked onward to see the fight at hand. The gold cloaks spread around, keeping on their toes. They were taller and wielded longer swords. Size meant nothing, though. Bran was a testament to that fact. While most men in the company were 6 feet or close to it, Bran was a meager 5 feet. Even then, he used his smaller size to his advantage. The boy stayed steady, with Summer growling menacingly at the 4 gold cloaks. They were outnumbered. Do you fools know who I am? Bran asked darkly. No one of the gold cloaks laughed mockingly. I am Brandon Stark of House Stark. Bran smirked. Here are my words. The wolf will bow to no one. Bran rushed forward, surprising the gold cloaks with a speed far beyond their own. The young Stark shoved his blade into the first man's gut, releasing his intestines and bowels, showering the square, painting it red. The man fell to his knees, screaming in an abhorrent horror. Behind the Stark, Summer rushed ahead, teeth bared and claws ready to maul. The wolf rammed his head into the nearest gold cloak, denting his armor. He jumped up, using his hind legs to his advantage, and pounced jaw agape. The direwolf's mouth was so large he engulfed nearly half of the man's torso in one go. Myra could hear the man screaming within Summer's mouth. She turned to see Naruto laughing along with countless company troops. Eyes went to the battle companions to see that they were just as weary of this show as she was. Jalabar was more distraught by this than the others. You come here, Bran roared, ripping his sword from another gold cloak's chest, to take our friends from us and expect us to lay down our weapons and let you do so. You expect me, a Tully and a Stark, to let you tear apart our family? Lannister scum, I'll kill you where you stand and send your heads back to that shit stain of a king. You swore fealty to Myra looked back to Naruto to see his smile drop. He was thinking something, but he just wouldn't say it. His arms dropped to his sides, his blue eyes began to shimmer when realization began to form on his face. Myra knew that look perfectly. Naruto jumped forward, hand wrapped around the pommel of his sword, and walked side by side with Bran. What is so interesting of this bastard that my brother wants him dead? Naruto asked the lead gold cloak. None of your concern, monster. The leader spat once more. If anger had any substance, Myra was certain this is what it felt like. It radiated all across the square. Her brown eyes shot to the dire wolf. Summer to see his teeth glimmer in the afternoon sunlight. The wolf was hunched over, ready to pounce, but it was from Bran. Her eyes widened with complete uncertainty. He's truly snapped, you bastard. Bran drew his bow faster than any man Myra had witnessed in her life. An arrow was knocked, and with a draw faster than light itself, Bran let loose. The arrow sped across the square, hitting the gold cloak so hard he flew back, arrow nailing him to the wall behind him. Bran took a deep breath, steps leading him forward. The last 2 gold cloaks looked at Naruto and Bran, near panicked. This fight was over. There was no need for senseless killing, not anymore. The moment she stepped from the mold of soldiers, the battle companions joined her, more than ready to put a stop to this. Why none of them did anything beforehand made her wonder, though. Maybe they wanted this to happen, but maybe not in the way it did. Myra stopped just at Naruto's side. This is Bran's fight. Naruto held his hands out, but Naruto, Myra, the prince, gave her a dark look. Leave him be, Summer. Sick them, Bran roared. The wolf wasted no time and rushed ahead, digging his teeth into one of the remaining gold cloaks, ripping his armor and skin, tearing him asunder. Bran shot around, and with a swing of precision he beheaded the other gold cloak. His blood shot up like a geyser, raining upon the Stark, whom of which seemed to relish in the blood. He turned to the remaining gold cloak and pressed his sword against his neck. I recognize you, he said loudly enough so everyone could hear. Your Yano slit. You held my father's head like a damn trophy. All right, Bran, that's enough. Naruto held out his hand. We need answers from him. It's Lord Commander. I don't give a fuck what you are. Bran rammed his pommel into the Lord Commander's gut. Naruto has questions and you will answer them. Why are you after one of my men? Naruto asked calmly. The battle companions gather around while Jalabar took Bran's sword. Myra sighed softly. Good thing Jalabar was here. But back to the interrogation at hand. That bastard was none other than a boy named Gendry Waters. Not only was he a bastard, he was Naruto's half-brother. All eyes turned to the boy to see his shining blue eyes that seemed to be an exact copy of Naruto's. It seems that Joffrey was off to kill every single possible competition for his throne. Myra processed that into one thing, and one thing only. Joffrey will try to kill Naruto as Well, judging by the look Bran was sporting, he'd come to the same conclusion. What's to stop Joffrey from going after Naruto? Bran shot forward, a dagger in his hands. You can't let them have your brother. Bran, calm down, let me go. Brandon, please just calm down. Ser Warren and Jalabar wrapped their arms around the irate Stark, who just wouldn't give up. Myra bit her lip, looking back and forth, heart racing. Bran was going to do something horribly wrong, something that she knew he was going to regret. Eyes were shooting back and forth, heads were twisting in all directions. No one knew what to do. If Joffrey didn't have Gendry's head, that would be taken as a sign of defiance. No. She had to do something. Without another word, she turned on her heels and drew a knife. Myra, what the hell are you doing? Bran screamed. I'm doing what I have to do. She bent down to one of the gold cloaks near Gendry and sliced through his neck, butchering and cleaving through the flesh, before finally removing the head from the body. She removed the helmet and smiled softly when she realized that she'd chosen the right corpse. Blue eyes and black hair, almost similar to that of Gendry's and Naruto's. She walked over to the congregation built around Lord Commander Janos Slynt. The man felt that he was about to scream when she sheathed her knife. With a flick and a strong pull, she removed the arrow from Janos' shoulder. Has Joffrey ever seen this man before? The Lord Commander shook his head erratically. Has Joffrey ever seen Gendry before? The Lord Commander shook his head, but it seemed that he was finally catching on to what he was saying. If you dare say no to me, I'll be having your head too. Don't fear Joffrey, fear the Fox Company. After this, don't ever think you can order us around. We no longer answer to the king, we answer to Prince Naruto and him alone. Now get out of here. She glared, pointing in her lover's direction. Before he changes my mind. Robb rushed along the field of battle, the howling wolves at his back and countless northern lords and riverland lords. Lord Tywin was on the run back towards Harrenhal. Just as planned, he couldn't stop the smile from spreading across his face. He drew his sword, slapping the reins of his warhorse. The sun was falling and nighttime was upon them. That meant Lord Tywin had two choices: rest and die, or run and die. Either choice made Robb a happy king. Nevertheless, the Lannister decided the latter of the two and continued his tactical retreat. Robb could already see the Stark banners waving over Harrenhal. Oh, how he could see Lord Tywin's head along with every other Lannister decorating the gatehouse on spikes. He gritted his teeth, the excitement and rage finally beginning to peak. Grey Wind let loose another powerful howl. This time, instead of signaling a charge, something else came from the dark woods that began to surround the Kingsroad. Wolves and dogs of various sizes and strength appeared behind Grey Wind. They all ran together, speeding across and past the trees, dodging and jumping over fallen trees and logs. Leaves and branches rushed past them, slapping their cheeks and faces, but that wasn't going to be enough to stop them. Nothing was going to stop them at this point. They sped across the fields. Lannister banners could still be seen in the dying light of dusk. Not only that, but the flames and burning braziers of Harrenhal were in the distance. Banners of blue and white along with pink and red could be seen. Lord Royce and Lord Bolton did what they were tasked to do. They succeeded in what they were tasked to do. Robb turned his head to Owen Norrie, the archer of the battle companions, and gave the mountain clansman a quick nod. The man simply smiled and drew an arrow with a quick motion. Another companion lit the tip on fire. He turned to the sky and pulled the drawstring back. With a deep breath, he released the drawstring, sending the arrow into the sky. Smoke trailed after it like a shooting star. With perfect precision, Robb watched a wall of fire shoot from Harrenhal and into the sky. The Lannister banner continued to move, though bringing more happiness to Robb's heart. This was where Tywin's vanguard was, his most loyal and toughest soldiers. This is where Tywin is. This is where this war ends. The flaming arrows landed, killing and setting Lannister banners on fire, giving more light to the darkening battlefield, or slaughter field, whichever one decided upon. Robb drew his sword, releasing the most animalistic roar he could muster. The Northmen behind him roared with so much passion Robb was certain even the Lannisters in King's Landing could hear them. This war was going to end before it could even really begin. Robb turned down to Grey Wind, and the two locked eyes. No words or gestures were made, but Grey Wind knew exactly what he wanted. The wolf used his strength to his advantage and released yet another howl before disappearing, moving as swift as the winds. His howl was followed by almost 100 separate howls behind Robb. The Northmen could be heard laughing and cheering on the canine army speeding ahead of them. Within seconds, the sea of wolves collided with the Lannisters' rear. It was like music. Their screams were so loud and numerous. Their screams were far louder than the beating hooves of his cavalry. Time sped up almost like a blur. He rushed past his men like a gray and brown flash. Within seconds, he plowed through the broken rear guard. No time was wasted as the rest of his forces smashed through the remainder of the Lannister rear. Blood and fire rained upon the battlefield. Men and beasts tore through the retreating Lannisters like locusts, To a field of wheat, there was no way that they were going to lose this battle. There was no way in seven hells that Tywin could win. He was outmanned for once and he was tired. Robb rushed to the front, sword swinging viciously with a powerful, terrifying accuracy. His battle companions merged together, forming a massive wedge. Like any wedge, he easily cut through the Lannisters, forcing his way towards Lord Tywin and his high horse. Lord Tywin could see him. Robb felt that this was it. This was going to be the end. He was going to finish this once and for all. He couldn't stop. He couldn't slow down his racing heart. Another swing and another dead man at arms. Robb wasn't going to let this chance slip from his fingers. He punctured through the final line of defense. Lord Tywin is in his grasp. Robb rushed forward, his horse butting heads with Lord Tywin's. The lucky bastard took one of his men's and thought that he could escape. Robb won't have any of that. As the two horses keeled over, neighing in pain, Robb spun around, sword ready to cut the head from the snake. What he didn't expect though was the Lannister to shoot around and clash his blade. The king in the North, Lord Tywin said with a condescending tone, fancy to find you here. The pleasure is all mine. Robb kicked the old man back, cocking his arm for another strike. Lord Tywin ducked and rammed his fist into the self-proclaimed king. He stumbled and backed away, bringing his sword to guard. The Lannister gave the Stark a dark smirk. Robb was now on the defensive. The tables turned too quick. Lord Tywin shot forward, sword glinting in the moonlight. Robb dodged, swinging his sword around. Tywin parried, leaving Robb open. Tywin shot forward, sword pointed. It seemed over. It seemed like all was lost, and Robb caught Lord Tywin's blade. Tywin's green eyes sprang open with surprise. Another shout left the young wolf's lips, and before the Lannister lion could react, his sword was no longer in his hands, and now in the Starks. Tywin growled, dodging and weaving between the Starks' swinging blades. Tywin had to admit, the Stark was far better with a sword than he thought, but he surely wasn't unstoppable with a quick thought. Tywin shot forward and tackled Robb to the muddy dirt below, ramming his fist into the bearded cheeks. Over and over he punched the Stark for an old man. Robb was completely caught off guard by his strength. Robb watched with a busted lip, broken nose and black eye as Tywin drew a dagger from his belt. Robb took a deep, painful breath, awaiting the inevitable. He raised his arm, dagger shimmering in the moon's shining light. Suddenly his arm was grabbed and twisted in a painful direction. The man roared in pain before he was pushed off of Robb's body. The Stark sprang to his feet. It was none other than the ever-loyal Daisy Mormont. She held her shoulder, nursing a disgusting wound. In her side was a crossbow bolt lodged rather deep. She looked at him with longing eyes, but before the young king could say anything, she shoved a sword into his hands before turning to fight the battle at hand. Go, your grace, she screamed, almost begging to defeat him. He took a deep breath, watching Lord Tywin try to twist his arm back into place. All around him his troops executed the plan with perfection. The gates of Harrenhal opened, releasing hundreds of Vale men and Riverlanders rushing out to meet them in battle. Tywin's vanguard was smashed, punching it into a giant bubble. All he needed to do now was kill Tywin. Kill Tywin, kill Tywin. Robb kicked the Lannister back, breaking his guard, and brought his blade around, slashing the Lannister across the chest. Tywin roared out in pain, stumbling away. He punched Tywin square in the face, breaking his stance completely. He was broken. Robb shot his arm around, slashing Tywin across the face. Blood sprayed in all directions, dirtying his rather clean sword. Robb kicked him to the ground, sending him in a wild frenzy to escape. Fuck. Robb felt his body freeze. Robb, he could hear her screaming his name, pleading. Little by little the night grew. He couldn't feel his legs. He couldn't stand. The moon began to fade into nothingness. The darkness is coming as it always did. Pain couldn't be felt, nor could the cool breeze of winter numb. He felt numb. Time skipped. Sansa swung her wooden blade, trying her best to keep up. She slid her feet against the stone floor, moving like a flower in the wind. Her eyes trailed to follow Arya, watching her move like a professional. Apparently her sister was in fact not a master, and in truth far from being one. Sansa took a deep breath and moved once more, swinging her sword again, trying to keep up with the first sword of Bravos. The man gave directions every step of the way and gave Sansa helpful tips to do better. For starters, Sansa had her hair up, no longer loose. Instead of a dress, she'd taken to wearing breeches like Arya now always wore. It took a while to get used to, but it's been a week since she first began, and to be frank, Sansa was enjoying it. While it was nothing like crochet, it required a precision similar Sansa took to striking and stabbing like a fish to water, but her footwork needed serious work. She moved too stiffly, and being fluid was far more difficult than what Arya described. Sansa looked around, going through the movements, spinning as if she was doing a pirouette. She was certain she was doing it right. Suddenly something caught her eye. Syrio was looking forward to test her and her sister. He swung for the two, but Sansa was the first to react. She clashed her wooden sword with as he smiled softly, before swinging his blade around almost as if it were a feather. Sansa's sword was knocked back, but Arya came along to take her place. Syrio, though, didn't seem intimidated. In fact, he seemed like he was rather enjoying this. Arya shot forward, keeping light on her feet. Syrio, though, was just as light. Sansa surmised that any lighter and the man might as well be floating. The two went at it, clashing constantly. There wasn't a moment where the two stopped. Sansa sprang forward the moment she saw the opening she waited for. With a quick swing, Syrio dodged at the last second, parrying and pushing Arya back. He twirled his wooden sword and held up a finger. Tsk, Sansa, child, you are moving too loud. He sighed. Smooth and swift, dance like the water and waves, be like the wind. Yes sir. Sansa nodded her head before getting back into stance again. Naruto rubbed his hands across his face, feeling sweat explode from his pores. Around him his battle companions stood around the war table, worried looks as well. Gendry was at his side, as any brother should. That was beside the point. What was the inherent problem they seemed to have at this point? How the hell can 10,000 men just disappear? Naruto rammed his forehead into the table, roaring in frustration. What happened to our scouts? What happened out there? It's been a fucking week and not a sign of Lord Randall Tarley. Gods damn it, Naruto, please, Myra whispered, wrapping her arms around his back. Calm down. You're beginning to make us uncomfortable. Can you blame me? He shouted in frustration. Please explain to me how 10,000 men can simply disappear. Myra sighed and leaned against the table. Bran stood on the opposite end and rolled his eyes, giving Myra a nod. Naruto walked forward and kicked the table over, roaring like a rabid animal. He was irritated. Everyone could see that, but he didn't need to throw a tantrum. A wine glass sat on a table. Not anymore. Naruto swung his arm so fast he shattered it completely without even feeling anything. His hands ran up to his head, and it was now that Bran felt he'd seen enough. Naruto, Bran shouted from across the room. Stop it, gods, you're acting like Joffrey. It was then that Naruto froze. He gulped and turned to his closest friends, finding all of them to be sharing the same distraught looks as Bran was. The prince took a deep breath. Releasing a pained sigh, he collapsed onto a couch nearby, wiping the sweat from his brow. It didn't take long, but Myra arrived, joining him, wrapping her arms around his body. She slowly brought her hands to his shoulders and began to massage him as best as she could, trying to slow down his racing heart. Around them the battle companions sat in the rest of the chairs, lounging and lying about. They were all equally stressed, but they couldn't begin to imagine Naruto's stress. He had to care for the lives of not just the 450 valiant souls of Fox Company, but the innocent lives of Tumbleton. Too many people's destinies lied in Naruto's hands. In a split second everything could be lost. Naruto released a shaky breath and leaned his head against Myra's, feeling at least slightly better now that he was within her embrace. Bran decided it was a good idea and joined their couch, completely ruining the aesthetics. The two had Naruto to keep his mind off his little outburst. Was quite glad that Bran didn't harbor any bad feelings towards him for deciding on Myra. If anything, Bran was all for it, saying that he needed Myra, and to be frank, Naruto couldn't help but agree. He needed Myra for comfort. He needed to be reassured. Myra for a while was replaced by Sansa, be it by works of man or fate. Naruto and Myra were together again. In all honesty, he wasn't complaining either. The two shed blood together in more ways than one, and that made them closer. He confided in her, and she did the same. They trusted each other, and the way he repays her as he screams in her face, yells at her, and nearly punches her. He shuddered, leaning into his seat. Before shooting up, he looked at Myra and placed a soft kiss onto her forehead. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry to all of you. I didn't mean to blow up like I did. I lost myself for a moment. Just don't do it again, Bran scolded, bringing a laugh from a few nights in a certain Asosi battle maiden, or what? Naruto asked amusedly. I'll use you as target practice while you sleep, Bran laughed. I've been training his night eye for archery, Naruto Jalabar added. He's become quite proficient. I wouldn't anger him, but I've seen better. A small cocky voice came from the side. Lady Tarina sat with her arms crossed over her chest and with a cocky disposition. Is that so? Jalabar asked with a raised brow. Here we go again, Sir Andar whispered to Gendry. What was that, Sir Jared? Tarina seemed rather calm for such a remark, but it was Andar, he quickly replied. His eyes were wide with sweat drops sliding down his cheeks. I said nothing. I told She doesn't like you Sir. Douglas released a bellowing laugh that was echoed by Delran and Naruto Why he asked worriedly. I've done nothing. By nothing you mean putting down women? Warren asked nonchalantly. He and Myra bumped knuckles, neither even looking at each other. I was merely jesting when I said those things. One as weak as you shouldn't jest about such things, Tarina said with a bit of a burning sensation. Left in the aftermath. Am I the only one feeling a slight burn? Gendry asked Naruto and Bran could be seen trying to cool themselves down while Myra was fanning herself with her hand. Oh bugger off. Jared rested his face in his palms. Why are all of you so against me? It's because we love you. Hellman burst into laughter. Fuck you, Jared snickered, leaning into his seat. A comfortable silence followed, leaving the companions to wonder what to do next. Things have changed rather quickly after they took Tumbleton. There was a problem though. The Royal Army was losing the battle against the South. At least 1 out of every 5 confrontations was a crushing defeat, with casualties skyrocketing. Of course there was a nagging question at the back of his mind. He sat up, gaining the attention of everyone present. Myra, he thought of how he was going to say this. What did you mean by we? Answered a Prince Naruto and am alone. I think it's self-explanatory. Myra gave him a confused look. Joffrey has no right to command you around like a dog. Besides, who's been with us since the beginning of the war? Bran asked. You have Naruto boss. We don't even ask for more money. That's how much we like you and support you. Warren smiled. Don't forget that we're hedge knights, but because of everything that you've been able to do we work for free. And don't forget me, Naruto. Lady Tarina spoke up. I only came here to train Bran, but you've shown something that others haven't had before. I can't explain it. Dashing good looks. This received a slap to the back of the head via Myra. Naruto was about to say something in response, but the banging sound of a distraught knock echoed throughout the hall. Their heads shot around towards the door, wondering what was so important that they had to be sought. Naruto sauntered over to the door and pulled it open to reveal a person quite tall, almost as tall as him. Once the body fell to the floor, bound and gagged with a hood over his head, there were 2 Fox Company soldiers that seemed rather excited. Myra shot to her feet, eyes wide with surprise, and rushed over to her lover's side behind her. The rest of the battle companions took their time getting to their feet. She shook her head and helped the prisoner to his feet. Pulling a rag, she wiped the places of bare skin free of the flecks of dry blood, revealing gashes and cuts. The companions dispersed, giving Myra her space, allowing the girl to lead the boy to a chair. Who is that? Naruto asked the soldiers. We don't know, but once we caught him, all he said was something about needing to talk to you. The female of the 2 stated with fear. When we tried telling him that we couldn't do that, he just attacked us. All right. Naruto wiped a hand across his face, feeling already worn. You 2 are dismissed. Spinning on his heels, Naruto took a deep breath and released a sigh. Myra gave him a look that received a small nod. Within seconds the hood was completely removed, revealing gagged mouth and a deep black blindfold. More cuts and a rather large bruise and a head of hair so black Naruto could feel the colors around him disappear. Another quick move, the blindfold was removed, revealing that this was no boy but rather a girl. Her eyes exploded with an all too familiar sapphire blue. Naruto shot his head around to Gendry and the boy to him as well. Even Myra and Lady Tarina were caught off guard by this. The assassin reached forward and untied the woman's gag, showing off her plump pink lips. She licked them for a bit, looking around, trailing her eyes back and forth. It was then that she locked eyes with the 2 Baratheon bastards. My name is Maya Stone, the girl mumbled. I am your sister Stark. Banners waved in the cooling wind. The battle was over. It was finished and they'd won, but there was a price. Thousands of dead littered the already dead fields surrounding Harrenhal. 300 years have passed since the Aegon's incineration of Harrenhal, and yet nothing has the courage to grow again. All around, men and silent sisters walked about, helping the wounded and the moving the dead along for better passage of supplies. But there was one, a woman, brown copper-toned skin and flowing black hair. She moved like a swift wind, healing and aiding the men. She saw both Lannister and Northmen. After all, to her there was no need to differentiate. She wasn't fighting this war, she was just a nurse trying to heal people and make the best of what she had. This was her first war. She's had the honor of healing the wounded, and she'd healed people during a Dothraki raid of one of the free cities. She'd healed men and women and children during a plague outbreak, but never has she even thought of healing people during a war. This was carnage that not even the Dothraki can muster. Already she'd done 2 amputations and 5 mercy kills. Oh, she felt terrible, but someone had to do it. Someone had to help. But as she healed the men, she couldn't help but feel that someone was watching her every move. Someone wanted to say something to her. Just before she could confirm her suspicions, she was violently grabbed away from the dying Lannister levy and pulled along towards the ruined keep of Harrenhal. On either side of her there was a man wearing a heraldic tunic bearing the sigil of a white sun and a merman bearing a trident. She didn't know what to make of it. The two men rushed her towards the castle, and a part of her believed that they were going to kill her for healing Lannister men, but of course if she was going to die here, they'd do it out in the open to show that no one should heal the enemy. She gritted her teeth, trying to stop the different scenarios from popping up in her mind. She watched the dark air around her turn into dark soot-covered walls. They were in a hurry and moved so fast that she could have sworn that she was getting dragged along. Nevertheless, the foreigner did her best to keep up, following against her while they came to a halt at the foot of a rather burned up, but still impressive door. The man with the white sun sigil knocked on the door 3 times. Not a second was wasted, and the door swung open to reveal a little less than 30 other men and 1 woman. They all bore scars and wounds from the battle recently, but none of them seemed to care. They were all concentrating on one thing: the man lying in the only bed available. He was still, and the woman couldn't tell if he was alive or not. It took a short while, but Talisa Mager finally realized that this was none other than King Robb Stark, the king in the north, the victor of every battle he's fought. The king in the north, the king. Her eyes went wide, a great cold rushed through her body. The 2 men pushed forward and tossed her a box filled with her medical supplies. All around her the famous battle companions of Robb Stark parted ways, giving her the space she needed. She gave them all a nervous look, but Daisy caught what she needed. The only woman of the group made quick movements of her hands and arms, leading a great deal of the people present out of the room save for the High Lords and Lady Catelyn. Robb's armor was quickly removed as carefully as possible so as to not cause him pain. Talisa knelt next to the man, covering his body with various ointments, and with a quick pry of her wrist the arrow lodged in his spine was removed with relative ease. Robb's face scrunched once the projectile was free. Talisa took a deep breath, examining the damage done to the king's body, completely caught her off guard by his ability to heal from such wounds. Maybe the rumors of the unkillable king in the north did have some merit. He'd healed from an arrow to the spine and the knee. She knew that most men would never fight or adventure again due to arrows in the knee. That would explain what the lords had told her. He stopped moving and practically froze on the battlefield, giving Lord Tywin enough time to escape with a small portion of his troops. It came with a cost. Harrenhal fell to the Northern Rebellion along with all lands and a massive part of the King's Road with it. Talisa took a deep breath, doing her best to keep the king alive, and her head on her shoulders. A freezing shudder went through her spine at the very thought of what these lords would do if she couldn't save the king in the north. There were too many people in this room, and it was beginning to make her uncomfortable with their unwavering glares or incessant stares, especially from the only woman dressed in armor. With another quick yank she'd managed to remove the final arrow. Blood poured in a steady stream from the unplugged wound. She could hear one of the women present gasp at the sight. With a swipe faster than any pickpocket that anyone has ever witnessed, Talisa plugged the hole with herbs and rags, stopping the flow. She took a quick breath before putting pressure enough to not cause pain. She could feel the king's soft beating heart. That was enough for her to feel a bit more courageous. With her handiwork she'd saved his life, and now all she had to do was make sure his wounds were properly treated and cured. His grace is healed, she smiled. I'll just have to continue looking over his body for the next few days. What for? The armor-clad woman asked rather defensively. I'll need to make sure that his body has adapted and taken to the healing herbs, Talisa replied. Your maesters and silent sisters aren't as knowledgeable as they like to think. Now would you please grant me some privacy? They all shared nervous looks, but in a small moment of surprise the eldest woman decided that she'd stay and watch as well. After all, who would leave some healer with their king? Lady Catelyn waved off the lords and the armor-clad woman from the room. Talisa watched the woman pull a seat next to the king and release the most awkward sigh she'd ever heard. What's your name? The noblewoman asked. My name is Talisa, she'd replied quickly. What's your family name? The woman was persistent. Mater. Talisa said after a short pause. Mater. Catelyn gave the woman a small look of confusion. Forgive me, I'm not familiar with that name. You're not from Westeros, are you? No. Talisa smiled softly. Uncommon here in Westeros, but an old one in Volantis. Volantis. Catelyn was eerily surprised. What is a Volantine doing this far west? I came to heal. Talisa squeezed the rag over Robb's bare chest. The man groaned, clenching his muscles and his body, feeling the healing water rush over him. If I may ask, Catelyn was interested now. What made you want to heal? My lady, there seems to Be something that needs your assistance. Lord Bolton appeared. Some of the men need a reminder. I'll be on to it. Lady Caitlin shot to her feet. It was a good talk. Lady Talisa. Lord Bolton, may you leave Daisy in my stead as you wish. My Lady Roose bowed his head, allowing Lady Stark her exit. Talisa sighed and went back to work. The wounds were healing nicely, and she had found that their king was a hard man. To kill wounds like these would have felled a normal man. I wonder if all Starks are this hard to kill. She reached over, snapping a few pieces of healing bark, but just before she could continue her work, a great overflowing of anger washed over the foreigner. She turned rather comically to come face to face with none other than the armor-clad woman from before. Hello. Naruto sat silently watching the horizon beyond. There had to be a better way to know whether or not his enemies were on their way. There was already too much at stake. His troops were happy and confident in their abilities. He was happy and confident. Those were great, but it wasn't enough. He needed a fight. He wanted a fight. Lord Randall Tarley has been avoiding him since the start. Over 10,000 men disappeared in less than a week. How? Naruto will never know. He leaned forward, resting his knuckles on the war table. He sighed. So far that's all he's been able to do. There's no fighting to be done, and since his forces are so small, the moment he leaves Tumbleton Fox Company will lose their only foothold in the Reach. Once that happens, they're stuck in enemy territory, surrounded on all sides by armies so much larger than their own. Even with his chakra, Naruto knew that there were just too many people to fight. If only his chakra coils weren't so shitty. From what Kakashi told him, he could only make at the maximum 5 clones. Naruto rested his forehead against the war table and released another sigh. I was told I made 100 the first time I ever used the jutsu. Naruto started wiping his forehead against the table. Why am I so different? You're not so different. Sasuke sat on the table. Your 2 previous incarnations, Aegon and Azor Ahai, didn't have chakra, but one had dragons and the other had an amazing sword. Naruto replied, and Sasuke asked, you have something that they don't? You at least can use your chakra. They did what they could with what they had, but they're so much better than me. I don't know what you find better than you. Sasuke facepalmed. Aegon fucked his sisters and Azor Ahai murdered his wife to finally complete Lightbringer. If anything, I think you got the luck of the draw. How? Naruto rose his voice. I have so much to worry about. My brother wants me dead. I think my mother became a puppet. My friend wants my head. My uncles want my head. Countless people still think of me a monster. Well, for starters, the Naruto I knew didn't have a family, Sasuke said with a frown. The Naruto I knew wasn't pampered as a prince and struggled. Aegon was the same. A pampered noble. Azor Ahai was a simple blacksmith. Naruto, and you have chakra. We just need to find a way to fix your coils. Why, you're right. Naruto deflated. I swear that you're probably the most dramatic one of the reincarnations. I don't know if that's supposed to be an insult or not. Naruto glared. Well, I'm going off to inspect some things, Sasuke piped before heading away. Do you want a shadow clone to possess? Naruto asked. No, Sasuke shrugged. Your coils aren't good enough yet. Last time I possessed a shadow clone without chakra, I nearly disappeared, remember? And with that, the Uchiha walked through the wall, taking full advantage of his specter status. Naruto walked away from the war table and towards the balcony of his chambers with a great view of the city. He couldn't miss anything in the courtyard. There were men and women chopping at wood and hammering away at planks. His order for catapults wasn't going fast enough. So far only 4.5 were completed. He'd ordered for at least 10. He hoped that Lord Randall Tarley continues to avoid Tumbleton, at least enough to give him much needed time. Naruto didn't think he'd ever say this, but he wanted the Tarley to continue avoiding them. He didn't care at this point. Eyes trailed along through the courtyard, finding more men training. This time they didn't wear the yellow armor or tunics of the royal army, but in fact they wore the armor standard of levies of the Reach. There were still about 1,000 left. In the city they'd become turncoat the moment Naruto held their liege lord hostage. The prince didn't care as long as they did their job in defending Tumbleton, but a feeling of disgust was wallowing in the depths of his stomach. He didn't trust them. They had just a little more than twice the amount he had, and they were spread across the entire city. If the lord decided to fight back, Naruto would have no choice but to slaughter them. He couldn't let that happen. They were an important resource that he was sorely lacking in manpower at the tip of the spear. He hasn't received word from Joffrey in ages. It seems the Baratheon was worried for Sansa and Arya. What in blazes could they be doing? The procession was finished. Princess Marcella was going off on her rowboat towards Dorne. Sansa could hear the queen sniffling and Prince Tommen trying his best to hold in his tears. Hell's Arya was even trying to comfort the boy. To Sansa, though she didn't know how to feel about all of this, she stood silently awaiting the inevitable journey back to the Red Keep. Things were quite normal around here. The Queen and the Hand were making quick remarks at one another, and Sansa couldn't forget the threats. They were always threatening one another. Why Sansa didn't know Lord Tyrion was kind sure he was a dwarf, but that didn't make him any less of a nice person. Sansa watched the boat finally disappear to the Dornish galley. It was over and she can finally return to her quarters and practice water dancing. Oh, how dearly she wanted to return to her training. Her icy blue eyes had lost their hue. There wasn't even a sparkle like there was before. With Lady at her side, Sansa lifted her skirts slightly to allow better passage over the stone steps from the beach behind her. Arya and Nymeria trotted along. Cersei called on the two girls, but they ignored her. Cersei took no insult and simply drowned herself in wine like she always did in front of them. The High Septon walked with his small entourage of Septons and Septas guards and royal army soldiers stood guard. They were coming across a very dangerous part of King's Landing, Flea Bottom. Sansa watched the area around her, eyeing the growing crowd. Civilians were dressed in all types of garb ranging from rags to practically nude. Some looked too skinny and others looked like they were so hungry they'd eat another person. Sansa was so glad that she wasn't the only one who felt the same way. Arya's hand rushed over to needle Nymeria, and Lady backed to each other, baring their teeth. Something wasn't right. Everyone could sense it. Give us food, someone shouted. Stop sending our sons to fight your wars. Cersei sat in her palanquin watching the people descend into insults and coy remarks towards her and her children, calling them all bastards and insulting her trueborn. They said he's a monster and a freak. Over and over they continued to spat the lies that Lord Stark had spread about Naruto. She had half a mind to roar back at the people and completely lose her composure. Something wasn't right. She poured herself another cup of wine and sipped away. Prince Tommen sat next to her, holding onto her arm, shivering. Even he could tell something was going to happen. Suddenly Cersei shot over. Spread across her face was nothing short of a shit pie. Dropping her wine glass, she screamed in disgust. It was then that all hell broke loose. Men charged forward, pushing the guards, both Lannister and royal army, towards the ground. Sansa and Arya shot back. To back, Arya drew her sword and Sansa drew the sword of a confused Lannister soldier. Slowly but surely the angry mob began to push against their defensive lines. Lannisters and royal army troops did the only thing they could do. Sansa and Arya didn't know who swung first, but whomever did it made sure to make a mess of it. Blood shot to the air, spraying the mob and the royal family like sharks. The blood did nothing to satiate the assembly. Sansa swung as fast as she could, taking the head from a skinny man rushing at her with a club. Arya jammed her sword into the gut of another. The two girls ran ahead, trying to find a place to hide. Cersei and Tommen were quickly carried away by the Kingsguard and the gold cloaks. It was almost as if they'd completely forgotten about the Stark girls. Sansa turned her head around only to find the High Septon, a man revered as the holiest of the holiest, tackled to the ground. He was stomped on, punched, and beaten by the raging people. Her eyes practically popped from her head when she watched the angry mob remove his arm with near ease. It wasn't long before those psychopaths began to feast of the fat Septon. Sansa the girl spun with a speed unknown before. Arya was nowhere to be found. Fear crept up in Sansa's chest. All around her, handmaidens were forced to the ground, their dresses ripped to shreds. Royal army soldiers were killing and getting killed. She didn't care for any of them. Where's her sister? Sansa jumped forward, reaching down to rip her own dress to reveal breeches beneath. Behind her, Nymeria and Lady were following close behind, forcing their way through the crowd. Whereas Arya, Sansa felt fire burn within her. A woman rushed towards Sansa, but the girl wasn't going to have any of it. She needed to find her sister. Sansa swung as hard as she can, digging her blade through the woman. In her rage, Sansa's sword got stuck in the dead carcass, leaving her weaponless. Nymeria rushed ahead, giving Sansa a good idea of where to go. Lady kept close, scaring people from taking Sansa from behind. The Stark sped forward, nearly breaking out into a full sprint. She was led to a small empty stable in the center. There seemed to be at least 3 men gathered around something. She could hear the struggle, the shouting, and before long it came to reveal Arya desperately fighting back. She snapped. Sansa's eyes rolled to the back of her head. Power exploded from within her. She blacked out. Lady and Nymeria shot forward, teeth extended and paws ready. The men were forced to the ground, freeing Arya from their grasp. The dire wolves tore into their flesh, crushing their bones in the power of their jaws. The men screamed, but the wolves weren't letting up. One tried running away, but completely forgot about Arya. The Stark glared at the man trying to escape, feeling the rage within her explode into an inferno. Her eyes rolled to the back of her head, revealing nothing but whites. The man froze in his steps. He turned on his heels, walking towards Arya, shaking against her hold. Arya snapped from her grip, reaching over for needle. With a quick rush, she shoved the blade into the man's gut. He collapsed to his knees, eyes locking with Arya's. The Stark twisted her sword, realizing that there wasn't enough pain. He groaned softly, feeling a waterfall of blood pour pour from his open gullet. Slowly but surely the light disappeared from his eyes, leaving Arya free from these lecherous men. She turned her attention to the direwolves. They were drenched in blood, but otherwise unharmed. Arya's head turned light. Sansa Bran kicked the soldier back. They swung far better than they did at the start of the war. No longer was this some training match. Instead, this was a washed-over, sugar-coated bloodbath. Were it not for their blunted blades, Bran was certain he would have accidentally killed a few of these men. Oh, but that wasn't to detract from their overall skill. Now, far from it, these men and women were professionals, and Bran wasn't afraid to say that. After all, one shouldn't be afraid to speak the truth. He ducked, feeling the blunted blade rush over his head of brown hair. Bran sped forward, hitting the leg, forcing the man to the ground. A battle is a battle, no matter the tools being used. The Stark was certain that these men knew what he meant when he first said, "That attack me with the intent to kill." Bran smirked. He wasn't about to start regretting that decision. A quick parry here, a deflection there, and a well-placed swing above. Bran defeated the final opponent, forcing her to the ground, and a painful-sounding thud. A swing, a slash. Later, he'd sheathed his sword and ran a hand through his thick brown auburn hair. He felt taller and far more powerful than before. He could feel it swirling within him. A soft sigh escaped his lips. Easing through, the soldiers helped themselves to their feet, giving the Stark nods and quick bows. It didn't take long, but he was left alone in the training ring. All the while, the rest of the Fox Company continued their training. He felt at ease being left alone, but of course there was a nagging feeling. Someone's eyes were planted on him. Someone was watching him. With a quick spin on his heels, Bran looked up. Thick auburn brown locks covered his view, but he could see who it was almost as clear as day. Maya Stone, the second bastard to miraculously appear. Bran wondered who else was going to show up last. He'd heard Robert Baratheon's bastards were all murdered him. Maybe it was just in King's Landing, I suppose. Bran had to admit, though, she was quite a beauty. He watched her as the winds grew, blowing through her short-cropped black hair. Bran couldn't help himself. Those thick lips of hers did nothing to betray her, but rather accentuate. He wanted to know what she was good at, though she had to have some worth to add to the company. He felt his throat dry the longer he stared at her. She was staring at him. He was staring at her. The Stark took a deep breath, feeling his body shake in the aftermath. Her eyes were shimmering like jewels. He couldn't look away. Suddenly a hand rested on his shoulder, leading him off. Bran's eyes were wide with fear, and for a moment he felt he shit his britches. Flanked on either side, a Baratheon stood tall and proud, one golden-haired and the other black of hair. The two had knowing looks on their faces. Gendry led Bran to the blacksmith and sat the boy upon a wooden stool. "I see you." Bran. Naruto smirked. "Didn't stop growing. Our sister looks attractive, doesn't she?" "I watch what you say." Bran. Gendry's face darkened softly. "We may not have known her long, but she is still our sister. What angle are they trying to play at?" The color in his face was fleeting. "Oh, we're jesting." Bran. Naruto smiled softly. "I wouldn't be so sure around Gendry, but I don't mean you harm. I suggest that you cut your hair." Gendry piped suddenly, the previous feelings gone completely. Bran gave the Baratheon bastard a confused look. No matter, the man shed his armor and his tunic, revealing bare muscled torso. Gendry shrugged and went along to hammer away on the anvil. Burning coals and wisps of fire shot about. The bastard looked to his brother and Bran before reaching over the forge. "How could I forget?" Gendry tossed Bran a helmet that bore semblance to a wolf's head. "Here, Bran, you seem to hate the Sowlet and Kettle helmets, and for you, brother." Naruto received a helmet that seemed to bear an orange hue. It was shaped in a rather familiar but still completely foreign arm. "What in the God's name is this?" Naruto asked with a confused look. "It's a fox with stag antlers." Gendry smiled. "I thought it fitting. Do you like it?" "Of course I do." Naruto threw the helm over his head, completely reminiscent to Sandor's own hound helmet. "I think it looks rather funny." A feminine voice appeared. All heads turned to see none other than the third Baratheon bastard, Maya. Her bright blue eyes were a different hue. Up close, she had a small innocent smile spread across her face as she walked along, taking a seat next to the Stark of the trio. The girl was already making herself comfortable. Now Maya." Gendry smiled. "No need to be rude, but I have to say Brandon's helmet is rather." The girl leaned into the Stark, appealing. Naruto and Gendry's eyes went wide and their jaws fell lax. She leaned closer, but Bran leaned away, slightly aroused, but at the same time horrified. Oh, things were going to get interesting. The four talked, laughed, and even shared a few stories. So many personalities put together, at least, that ensured that there was never going to be a dull moment. Dull moments. Bran leaned back against the column behind him as Naruto continued his story. Ever since he'd come south, Bran hadn't had a dull moment. There was always something to do, and there was always something to laugh about. There was always something. What if I was the one to fall from that tower? Bran thought to himself. What If would things still be the same, Prince Naruto? There was an echo shooting across Tumbleton's courtyard. My lord, Prince Naruto. Bran rose to his feet. No soldier of Fox Company would dare interrupt unless it was important. The Stark was intrigued. This wasn't some soldier. It was a scout. He was worried, terrified, and stricken with terror in every which way possible. The scout had sweat pouring down his brow. It had seemed that he'd been running for ages. Bran headed from the smithy with Maya close behind. Watching the scout tumble and speed through the comrades of Fox Company, he'd arrived huffing and puffing, doing his best to seem presentable. I bring news, he shouted, gaining the attention of everyone in the courtyard. The royal army is divided. King Joffrey crushed at Rook's Rest with complete casualties. Joffrey has retreated back to King's Landing. Lord Tywin Lannister annihilated all across the Westerlands and the Crownlands with casualties in the tens of thousands. King Robb Stark has been wounded at Harrenhal. His current state of health is unknown. 5 Crownlands lords have defected to King Renly, giving him another 10,000 men, while another 5 defect to King Stannis. Naruto leaned against his column, raising a hand to his sweat-drenched blonde hair. This isn't good. Bran knew it. They all knew it. Naruto turned to the 3 of them. Worry and confusion wrought across his features. There was always something wrong, wasn't there? There always had to be something wrong. Bran rushed forward into the courtyard. Fox Company troops gathering round the scout continued. Lord Tywin has issued a full retreat to King's Landing. The scout shouted, all royal army commanders are to fall back to King's Landing if possible. King Stannis Baratheon plans to mount an attack on King's Landing within the month. A series of murmurs and whispers of despair shuffled through the men and women of Fox Company. Bran looked side to side, finding even some of the battle companions were seemingly defeated by this revelation. Jalabhar had never looked so weak. He couldn't believe his eyes. Even Myra and Naruto were showing signs of almost giving up. From his point of view, Naruto, the one who promised freedom and justice, the man who shed blood, shed tears, and nearly gave his life, the man who seemed invincible in almost every single way, was afraid. He is afraid. Bran couldn't blame him, but the Stark knew that wasn't a good excuse. Hey, the Stark shouted, getting the prince's attention. Look at you. Naruto gave Bran a confused look, but his pessimistic attitude sure wasn't going away. What is it, Bran? The prince groaned, suddenly feeling a fist dig into his gut. You are supposed to be our commander, our leader, Bran roared. What the hell are we all supposed to do when you are hope and beacon? Looks like he's already been defeated. Huh, we look up to you, Naruto, we all look up to you, but Bran, the Stark shouted again, getting the attention of everyone present. Not this again, Brandon, please. Jalabhar even jumped in. Jalabhar, not you too. Bran grabbed his mop-like hair and roared in frustration. Since when in 7 hells did large numbers scare you? Since when did large numbers stop you? Since when could no did they ever stop us? Brandon, we're not scared, we're thinking rationally. Ser Delran shouted back at the boy, they outnumber us far beyond any numbers. Don't win battles, we've proven this over and over again. Bran shouted once more, if we outthink our enemies we can win. No, we can't. Naruto sighed. Renly has over 100,000 men now. Stop being so melodramatic. A voice sounded from behind, a feminine voice. Hubaka the woman roared, I don't know why you are being far whinier and downbeaten than any other reincarnation, but I'll damn well make sure you don't stay that way. Shinaro. Naruto felt his body explode in flame. Heat beyond belief. This newcomer was a lot like Sasuke and Kakashi. She was familiar, but there was something completely off about her. It's the pink hair, definitely the pink hair. She indeed had a head of pink hair. Her hands were on his chest, covered in a bright green light that of course was unseen to the naked eye save for his own. He could feel her chakra rushing through his body like the blood speeding through his veins. All eyes and heads were turned to him, both intrigued and slightly disturbed. The pink-haired woman smiled at him before disappearing. Just as she left they arrived. Naruto's jaw dropped in an instant. There couldn't be that many. An involuntary shiver rocked his body violently, bringing nervous and tense jaws upon the men and women of Fox Company. He was frozen in place. He could see them, he could sense every single one of them. There couldn't be that many already here, there just couldn't. Naruto couldn't believe any of this. He reached over, drawing his sword in an instant, scaring those in his immediate vicinity. There, here, Naruto screamed, to your positions. Gio, go. Wait, who's here? How do you know? Myra asked, running alongside the Baratheon. Lord Tarly is here and I just do. Naruto rushed forward, the battle companions catching up through the fray of men and women. Go, Bran. Jalabhar, take the archers along the southern and western wall. Myra, as much as I want you here with me, you and the knights will lead the inner city defense, so stay in the courtyard. Lady Tarina. Ser Delran, I need you to lead your best fighters. and go into the sewers and lie in wait. The sewers. Serdel ran gave the prince an appalled look. Just do it. Naruto could see them moving along. There were thousands underground, and on the surface it was like a sea of blue and red moving along like a plague spreading across the normally green expanse of grasslands surrounding Tumbleton. Naruto jumped skipping steps with small wisps of chakra leaving his feet. He was back at his sides. Both Gendry and Maya were armed and were clipping their armor shut. Naruto rested his hand on the wall crumble awaiting the inevitable arrival of Lord Randall Tarley's forces. Maya and Gendry stood silent watching the empty horizon. It will be a matter of moments before the second battle of Tumbleton will begin. I can see them. Naruto thought. It seems Sakura's theory worked. Sasuke thought with his arms crossed over his chest. That's her name. Fitting, I guess. Sasuke paused. Never mind, you don't know Naruto. I have important things to discuss before we begin this battle. Go ahead. The morale of the Tarley's men is shoddy to say the least. Sasuke spoke. From what I can tell, if you kill him you win the battle. His men will scatter and some might even join Fox Company. Cut the head from the snake and the rest will fall. Sasuke finished with a smirk. Naruto, I want you to know that it won't be easy. Sakura, open your chakra so use it. But I don't know how to use it, Naruto replied, sliding his fox stag helm closed. I don't know jutsu except for that one that Kakashi was teaching me. Use that only when you know you're covered in smoke or shade. Sasuke quickly said, your men might or might not like that and turn against you. Got it? Naruto smiled. I know exactly what to do. Good. The Uchiha took a deep breath. Now that you have chakra, make a shadow clone and I'll possess it. You need all the help you can get in this fight. Naruto, are you sure that's a good idea? Naruto asked. Of course. Sasuke took a deep breath, channeling his own chakra. As long as there are chakra coils I'll be fine. I think you think. Naruto could be heard sighing in despair, getting a few weird looks from Fox Company soldiers standing next to him. You don't know how scared I am right now. If you disappear, what the hell? Naruto, calm down. Sasuke laughed. Believe me, we'll be fine. The Baratheon took a deep breath, resting his palms on the stone kernels. This was insane. 10,000 men were coming this way to end their lives. 10,000 against 450. The odds were unnaturally against him, far more than ever before. But Bran was right. He was being stupid. He was being his old self. I made a promise to myself and the gods. I will no longer back down. I am no one's plaything to torture. I am no one's slave. Naruto roared out, sending a shiver through the men and women around him. He raised his sword, showing its glimmering beauty. No time was wasted. Maya and Gendry nodded their heads at their half-brother and drew their own swords, releasing a roar of their own. Sooner than light their war cries spread like wildfire across the town. Men and women shouted and roared at the top of their lungs, more than ready to embrace victory. Naruto gulped. Banners were waving in the distance. So many banners. Naruto had never seen such a thing in his life. Across the horizon, men and war machines were pushed along. At least 3 siege towers were seen, along with a plethora of ballistae and catapults. He gulped again. His own siege machines weren't tested, nor were they ever used. Damn Lord Tarley for constantly avoiding Tumbleton only to attack now. Naruto turned his head, facing the 4 catapults he had completed and the one that was only halfway finished. Men and women were pulling the arms back, loading the boulders. He had to wait for the right moment to use them. Stand steady, Naruto cried out, revealing a completely different personality from before. Power exploded from within him, finally flowing smoothly compared to what it was before. Naruto took slow deep breaths, trying his best to channel his strength. The banners were moving closer. Surrounding Tumbleton was nothing short of a sea of glimmering armor. Swords and spears. Cavalry was held in the mid-rear, surrounded by formations upon formations of infantry, namely spearmen. For a moment Naruto didn't know what a good time would be, but he caught sight of their catapults. Perfect. Turn all catapults to the right 5 degrees. Naruto roared, on my command you fire. Fox Company rushed into action, turning his eyes back to the Tarley's forces. Their catapults were still moving into position. They had 10 catapults. Naruto's eyes shot back and forth, watching the ballistae rolling into place. Suddenly the formations began to part and a group of 5 knights began to trot to the front of the battle lines. They wore heavy armor, each bearing the sigil of House Tarley. Naruto shuddered in his armor. Something big was coming. Prince Naruto, a voice echoed from below. I want no bloodshed. Surrender now and your men and women will be allowed to live. That doesn't sound like a good deal to me, Naruto responded in a rather cheeky tone. Don't mock me, the lord below roared. I am willing to end this fight before it even begins, but you want his head. Bran's voice could be heard. To hell's with you, Fox Company will shove those words up your arse. Naruto would have laughed a resounding Roar echoed all around the city from the soldiers of Fox Company. At least their morale hasn't wavered yet. He glared at the lords below, waiting for them to remove their helms. Lord Randall Tarley was definitely among them. He watched them with careful eyes. Archers were moving along the formations, making Naruto nervous. There were a lot of archers built up in one place. There was a glimmer though. A glimmer so beautiful that it distracted Naruto completely. Heartsbane. Naruto's jaw dropped, and he could have sworn that a blob of saliva dropped from his mouth. Begin the assault. The formations began to move once more. Siege towers lurched forward. Naruto waited with his sword poised towards his men. Catapults were locked and loaded. He smirked. Fire catapults. Naruto shot his sword overhead, giving the signal. The soldiers on the walls dropped to their feet as the boulders rushed above their heads. A series of screams and howls of pain echoed throughout the battlefield, echoing through the battlements. Naruto shot up to find all 3 siege towers have been put out of order. Perfect. With a quick order to reload, Naruto turned his attention to the archers built up just along the south and western wall. He nodded his head, to which Bran thankfully understood. The archers of Fox Company ran against the length of the walls, drawing their arrows, knocking to their bows. Naruto raised his sword once more. The catapults were loaded and ready for launch. For a moment he felt that he was going to win. Everything was for naught. Once he remembered Lord Tarley's own, he bit his lip, but knew what he had to do. Everyone get down now. Naruto pulled his siblings to the floor as fast as he could, breaking formation with a quick glance. The sight of a massive boulder was all he could see. Naruto wrapped his hands around the collars of his siblings, all the while jumping from the wall. Maya and Gendry screamed out as they descended. Naruto landed kicking up a few tiles from the cobblestone courtyard, but was otherwise unharmed. Gendry and Maya looked at one another with eyes as wide as plates. The prince gave them looks that they knew well. Go and reform the line. I have something to do. The boy ran forth, leaving his siblings behind. With a quick motion the boy slid his helmet shut. Naruto, go to the sewer, Sasuke said, running up alongside him. Your plan as it is perfect. Just go down there and meet up with Ser Delran and Lady Tarina. You're starting to act more like yourself. Good. Naruto smiled. All right. Here I go. The prince bent over and pulled the manhole up, hurling it onto a nearby stable. With ease the men and women around him looked in awe. Sapphire orbs gazed back and forth, watching the troops snap back to their jobs. With a deep breath Naruto jumped into the sewer, digging his legs into the knee-high sewage. Water eyes trailed left and right looking for the torches. He was alone, and this was more than the perfect time for some ninjutsu. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A series of pops and explosions were heard. Perfect. Sasuke's voice sounded from within the dark sewer. Let's go, we have a battle to fight. Sasuke, are you alright? Naruto asked. Is the body good enough? It'll suffice. Sasuke nodded. Just keep making clones. If I get hit even once I'll disappear and I'll need another body. Will we still have that mental link you spoke about? Naruto asked as he and his clone team rushed through the sewer. Definitely. Sasuke nodded. In the darkness, my Sharingan is working well with these chakra coils. I guess it'll be better if we speak like this then. Naruto piped. Good thinking. Sasuke replied. By the way, they're just down this tunnel. The team rushed through the sewers. No less than a minute passed before Naruto arrived at the sewer grates that led to the river nearby. No more than 40 men and women stood lying their backs against the metal grate. Their hands rested against the pommels of their swords and handles of their axes. There were a few archers as well. The more the better, Naruto assumed that could be arranged. He smirked within his fox helmet. No words were shared as the troops parted for him. The prince rested his hands against the square grates, examining the battle outside. Shutting his eyes, he sent a small untraceable wave of chakra in all directions. Little by little the sappers came to view. There were 10 sappers working in 5 different tunnels towards the only sewer grate of Tumbleton. Naruto smirked. While they fought above ground, they'd fight beneath. This fight will encompass all of Fox Company and the entire city if they're not careful. Eyes still shut, he channeled his chakra again, and with a soft whisper 80 shadow clones appeared just down the tunnel, free from sight of his troops. They will have to stay in reserve should Randall Tarley's forces prove too much of a problem. His eyebrows twitched. Something wasn't right. The walls were bashing and shaking above them. He tilted his head as the amount of chakra he sent out increased. Catapults continued to fire their payload, but instead of aiming at Fox Company, they were aiming at the city itself. Naruto gripped the metal grates. The formations of men were changing once again, this time giving room for something else entirely. Naruto tilted his head once more, channeling more chakra. They're bringing out ladders to scale the walls. Sasuke, Naruto thought, should I make more clones to help in the defense? Yes. Sasuke's reply was short and sweet. Make enough to counter. Conserve your chakra for when we assault the main forces outside. of the city. That's exactly what I was thinking. Naruto smirked as his eyes popped open. Another 80 clones appeared, this time farther down the sewer tunnel close to the entrance. Should the Tarly forces breach past the wall, his clones would burst from the sewers and hold them back. Naruto held steady, not saying a word to the still confused Ser Delran and Lady Tarina. They would see soon enough what he was planning. A quick chakra blast was sent out, revealing that the sappers were a lot closer than he'd originally thought. The dirt in front of them began to trickle and crack. The riverside was beginning to fill with pebbles and chunks of mud. Slowly but surely Naruto began to see trace images of pickaxes and shovels beating away at the dirt. Lord Randall Tarly would have sent a force above ground, but the rolling hills surrounding the sewer grates would only make his men easy targets. Sapping through the hills was his only choice. Naruto knew that well enough. Sappers Ser Delran looked to Naruto with confusion in his blue eyes. How the hells did you know they were coming? I have my ways, Ser Delran, Naruto replied. Give me a bow and some arrows. On my mark, all of you fire as fast as you can towards the sappers. Yes sir. The resounding cry echoed throughout the sewer tunnels. Naruto drew an arrow, quickly knocking it to the bow. He pulled the drawstring back with as much power as he could muster, keeping the arrow aimed at the possible targets. The dirt leveled, revealing holes and shafts held open by wooden beams and columns. The prince narrowed his eyes at the targets. These are sappers. They must have some sort of explosive with them. Little by little they began to file from the 5 new tunnels dug out beneath Tumbleton's landscape. Men poured into the ford, wading through the waters of the river flowing through Tumbleton. Fire! Naruto's cry rung in the soldiers' ears before they could draw their swords or raise their shields. Arrows dug into their heads, necks, and chests. Many died immediately. With a powerful kick, the great shot forward, knocking over a group of Reach men and Stormlanders. Blood shot up, painting the ford red. Naruto and his troops shot out from the sewer, swords drawn and shield Armstrong. Naruto jumped down upon an unsuspecting Reach sergeant and dug his foot into the man's chest. Using the training Kakashi had taught him, the boy ducked into the water, quickly bringing his sword around. The blade slashed through the sergeant's chest, showering blood onto his troops. Naruto rushed forward, swinging his sword once again, digging the blade into the neck of a young Stormlands levy. Not wanting to get sidetracked, the boy spun on his heels, elbowing the corpse from his blade. A quick twirl later, Naruto beheaded another levy. He shot forward, shoving his blade into the chest of a Reach man glaive wielder. The glaive man didn't realize it before it was too late. Naruto spun his dead body around, leaving his sword in the man's chest, grabbing his glaive instead. Reach men and Stormlands levies kept their distance from the prince. Naruto was being smart. He kept them distracted to him while his own troops cut them down from the rear. Little by little the first wave through the tunnels was defeated, up until all that remained was the corpses of the first assault. War cries and roars could be heard echoing from within the city walls. Naruto shut his eyes and let his chakra explode outwards. From what he could tell, Randall Tarly's army had successfully taken the city's walls and were pushing his forces back to the town center. If they take the center, they take the city. Naruto couldn't allow that. Placing a hand on his forehead, his order was received by his clones. No time was wasted. The clones shot from the sewers, giving him perfect image of the city. Randall's forces were making a mad push to get the town center, so mad in fact they were swarming through the streets, spreading themselves thin. Naruto smiled once more. Lord Randall knew he had the upper hand, and he was flaunting it. A mistake. The prince was going to manipulate the clones spread through the city, making sure to avoid places where his troops were defending. The clones were created with extra chakra, making them more resilient to damage. Given his great skill and discipline, Naruto was certain these shadow clones would be great even without ninjutsu. He turned his attention back to the fight at hand. Ser Delran had just finished tearing his sword from a wounded, now dead Reach man. Lady Tarina and Lady Sorsha were cleaning themselves of the blood and gore that painted them. Sasuke was faring well and wiped his sword clean of muck. So far they were surviving. The prince waited for a moment and knelt. He needed to come up with a plan to divert the Tarly's attention. Almost as if a spark of imagination had ignited within his mind, Naruto gave quick orders to his men and women. Sasuke rushed alongside them, heading into the tunnels. Naruto surmised that the tunnels must lead to the rear, Randall Tarly's unprotected rear. If all of his siege weapons being at the vanguard was any indication, Naruto waited for a moment and channeled as much chakra as he could. Just before he felt that he was going to explode, he roared out his ninjutsu, bringing forth the largest explosion of smoke he'd ever been graced to see. Moments passed and the boy coughed his lungs into soreness, but from the smoke came to reveal no less than 100 doppelgangers. He smiled brightly, sliding his helmet closed once more, almost like a well-oiled machine. The clones did the exact same thing, moving like one uniformed army. Once more orders were given and the clones rushed through the tunnels, while 20 stayed with Naruto. He had other business to attend to. Naruto jumped over the hills as the last of his clones disappeared into the tunnels. In his hand, a standard arming sword was wielded. Since he'd managed to misplace his bastard sword, he and his clones though marched together. 21 of them marched over the rolling hills. Naruto raised a fist, though halting his advance. He shut his eyes when the Tarly's forces began to shift direction. Chakra shot forth, revealing that his troops made it under the cover of thick smoke. Thanks to Sasuke's rather inconspicuous genius, the clone emerged, sticking close to Sasuke, doing their best to distract and kill the Tarly division. Sasuke though was covered in a bright blue hue. He was channeling his own chakra. Hopefully Sasuke still retained knowledge of ninjutsu. Suddenly Naruto was snapped from his chakra, scouting by a massive explosion that shook the battlefield. He turned his head around to see a pillar of fire rising from the ground up. Men screamed in pain, but no one knew where it came from. Thanks to the thick smoke that Sasuke had managed to deploy, the Fox Company was hidden, giving more confusion to Lord Randall's forces. This was more than perfect for Naruto. He rose to his feet, brandishing a new look on his face, and twirled his arming sword. In the center of the formations rushing up to the walls of Tumbleton sat the Lord himself. Randall was constantly looking back and forth, trying to understand what was going on. Suddenly another explosion shook the battlefield again, this time instead of fire, lightning. Naruto couldn't believe his eyes. Lightning struck down upon a large group of troops, all dead before they could even blink. Naruto sucked up his fear and motioned for his clones to follow as closely as possible. They started with a slow advance, trying to use the hills as cover. No matter how slow he was moving, Naruto knew that Sasuke still had more weird tricks up his sleeves to continue distracting the Tarly forces. Naruto shut his eyes as tightly as he can go, channeling the power within him. He found himself in his mindscape rushing through the bars. He finally came to a halt at the foot of none other than Kakashi Hatake. The two didn't speak. There was no time. Kakashi knew what Naruto wanted, but he couldn't give him the full training yet, so with a begrudging sigh, Kakashi placed his hand on Naruto's forehead and channeled his chakra into the boy's body. The effects were instantaneous. The prince collapsed to the watery floor, gripping his head. Energy shot throughout him, filling his head with memories that were once again not his own. Balloons and spiraling water appeared in his mind, the images of jamming a glowing ball in a bespectacled man. Naruto started to shake, finding the images of two clones helping him create a giant spiraling four-pointed star made of wind, no less. Naruto couldn't understand any of this, but one thing was certain. This was the next jutsu that he had to learn. It's called Rasengan. Kakashi whispered. The sewer disappeared, the mindscape crumbled. Moments passed, and before long Naruto found himself crouched on the dirt, staring aimlessly at the great expanse of infantry standing in his way. He snapped his head around to find his clones gripping their heads. Maybe my abilities channeled over to my clones. Naruto smiled at the idea. No, he had no time to experiment. This jutsu either works or doesn't. From his memories, he required rotation power and stability. He knew what he had to do. I need a shadow clone to help me, don't I? Naruto looked to one of his clones and began channeling chakra to his right hand. Slowly but surely a ball of chakra came to life, spinning and building in his palm. The shadow clone held his hands around the glowing ball, spinning its own chakra in a different direction. If his memories were of any merit, that should help the Rasengan keep its shape and continue spiraling. It grew, and before long he found that he'd created his first Rasengan. Naruto's eyes were wide with fright and utter surprise. Sweat poured down his brow and back, completely caught off guard by his sudden success. Even his own clones were awestruck at this point. Naruto didn't know what to do with it. Kill him, a voice sounded ahead. Naruto looked up to see a Tyrell sergeant based off the golden rose on his heraldic plate armor. The man was leading a small force of men towards the rather unprotected eastern wall. Naruto's eyes widened at the sight. At least 100 of them were coming his way, and he couldn't forget about the ladders either. And oh, I can't be scared. Naruto channeled chakra to his legs and within seconds shot forward with chakra oozing from his legs. The Tyrell sergeant didn't see him coming. Rasengan, Naruto cried at the top of his lungs. The attack drilled into the sergeant's chest, digging into his armor. Naruto watched in horror as the attack exploded in the man's chest, sending him back in a flurry of blood and shrapnel. A few men were launched back by the blast radius that was far greater than anything Naruto had ever witnessed in his life. At least he knows it works. Calling forth his clones from the hills, Naruto decided it was time to bring about his final counter-attack. Lord Randall Tarly, Naruto cried out, I'm coming for you.